My name is Charlotte Brandon, and in the year 1847, London believed it knew me. They saw the dresses, the posture, the polite smiles I wore like armor. They saw a young woman admired in candlelit ballrooms and spoken of in hushed, approving tones. What they did not see was how lonely admiration can be, or how quietly a heart can break while standing perfectly stilled. I was surrounded by people, yet unseen, except by him, or so I believed. The Marquess of Whitmore moved through society like a man carved from marble, controlled, impeccable, untouchable. When he entered a room, conversation softened and eyes followed. And when his gaze occasionally found mine, my heart betrayed me every single time. I told myself stories, dangerous ones that I told myself his silence meant depth, that restraint was his way of loving. I convinced myself that if I waited long enough, if I proved patient enough, he would finally choose me. I built an entire future inside my imagination, brick by fragile brick. For years, I loved him quietly. I memorized the sound of his footsteps in long corridors. I learned his moods before he spoke them aloud. I waited, always waiting, believing love was something earned through endurance. Then came the evening that destroyed everything. The halls of Whitmore Estate glowed with gold and firelight, polished marble reflecting chandeliers that seemed too bright for my trembling heart. I had rehearsed my words 100 times, whispering courage into the mirror until my voice no longer shook. That night, I would finally speak. When I told him how I felt, my voice was soft, not desperate, not dramatic, just honest. I offered him my truth with bare hands, hoping he might hold it gently. He listened without interruption, and oh, anger. No warmth, just distance, and then he said it 0.5 words, precise, polite, merciless. I will never love you. The room did not spin. There was no dramatic collapse. Instead, something far worse happened. Everything inside me went silent. In that moment, I felt foolish, not for loving him, but for believing love could grow in absence. He explained himself afterward, speaking of duty, expectations, and lineage. He spoke as though affection were a weakness neither of us could afford. I nodded. I smiled. I thanked him for his honesty, because that is what women like me were taught to do. Bleed quietly. I walked away with my head held high, every step measured, every breath controlled. No one saw my hands trembling. No one heard the sound my heart made as it broke. That night, alone in my room, I allowed myself to fall apart. I cried into my pillow until dawn stained the sky. I mourned not only the man I loved, but the woman I had been, the one who believed patience would be rewarded, the one who thought she was worthy of being chosen. By morning, something inside me hardened. I made myself a promise, painful, necessary, final. I would never wait to be loved again. If love came, it would have to find me standing, not hoping, and I believed, truly believed, that this was the end of my story. I had no idea. It was only the beginning. After the Marquis spoke those 5 words, something in me changed, not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently. I continued to attend gatherings, to smile when expected, to dance when invited. Society saw no difference, but inside, I had become careful that I no longer dreamed. I no longer waited. I observed life from a distance, like a woman who had learned the cost of hoping too deeply. Love, I decided, was a beautiful illusion, one meant for others. It was during this quiet withdrawal that the Duke of Ashford first truly noticed me. Not my gowns, not my face, but my silence. He was not a man who commanded a room the way the Marquis did. There was no cold authority in him, no effortless dominance. Instead, there was something steadier, a calm confidence that did not demand attention, Our first real exchange did not happen at a ball. It happened in a library. I had retreated there to escape the music and the laughter that felt too loud for my heart. I stood near a tall shelf, pretending to read while listening to my own thoughts unravel. That was when he approached, holding a book in his hands. "I thought you might appreciate this," he said gently, offering it to me without expectation. I looked at the cover. It was a novel about second chances, about quiet courage, about love that did not announce itself but remained when storms passed. "How did you know?" I asked. He smiled just slightly. "Because people who listen often carry stories others miss." No one had ever spoken to me like that. From that day on, the Duke of Ashford appeared in small, unassuming ways. Never intrusive, never insistent. He spoke when I wished to speak and fell silent when I needed quiet. While others filled the air with compliments, he filled it with understanding. Sometimes he brought me a single flower, never extravagant, never presented as a performance. Other times, it was another book, always chosen with unsettling precision. He remembered the smallest details, which authors I favored, which topics made my eyes soften, which conversations drained me, and that frightened me. Because cruelty, I had learned to survive. Kindness required surrender. I kept my guard firmly in place. I reminded myself that gentleness could still wound, that affection often came with expectations. I refused to let my heart lean too far in his direction, yet slowly, dangerously, I found myself looking for him. I noticed the way his presence calmed me, the way my shoulders relaxed when he entered a room, the way he never tried to impress me, never sought to claim me. He did not treat me as something to be won. He treated me as someone to be understood. One afternoon, as we walked through the gardens of Ashford Estate, I finally spoke the truth I had kept buried. "I am not the woman society believes me to be," I said quietly. "I do not trust easily, and I do not love freely." He did not flinch. "Then allow me to be patient," he replied. "I am not in a hurry." Those words unsettled me more than any declaration ever could. For the first time since my heartbreak, I felt something stir. Not desire, not longing, but something far more dangerous. Hope, not the fragile kind that waits to be chosen, but the steady kind that grows when it is not forced. I still did not believe love would find me again, but I began to believe that perhaps I would not have to face the world alone. And without realizing it, I had stepped onto a path that would change everything. I did not fall in love with the Duke of Ashford all at once. There was no sudden realization, no racing heartbeat that announced itself dramatically. Instead, my feelings changed quietly, the way winter surrenders to spring without asking permission. Days passed, then weeks, then months. Somehow, the Duke became part of my routine. His presence felt natural, like something that had always belonged there. He did not demand my time or affection. He simply offered his own, freely, without condition, and that was what frightened me most, because with him, I could not hide behind formality. He noticed when my laughter was forced, when my thoughts drifted too far inward. He never pushed me to explain, but he always made space for the truth. One evening, as we sat by the fire at Ashford Estate, he spoke words I did not expect. "I know your heart has been wounded," he said quietly. "I do not ask you to forget it." I looked at him, startled. "I ask only that you do not let it define what comes next." No man had ever spoken to me with such care. No one had ever acknowledged my pain without trying to diminish it. In that moment, I realized something dangerous. That I trusted him. That realization unsettled me deeply. Trust was the thing I had sworn never to give so easily again. Yet with him, it did not feel like a risk. It felt like relief. Still, I hesitated. Love had once promised me everything and left me with nothing. I feared that choosing again would make me a fool, that allowing myself to care would erase the strength I had fought so hard to rebuild. The Duke sensed my conflict, though he never named it. One afternoon, he asked me to walk with him through the rose garden. The sky was pale, the air soft with the scent of flowers just beginning to bloom. We stopped beneath an old archway, ivy climbing its stone sides there. Without an audience, without grandeur, he spoke. "I do not offer you a love that burns loudly," he said. "I offer you a love that stays when silence comes." My breath caught. "I cannot promise passion that overwhelms," he continued. "But I promise respect, loyalty, and a life in which you are never made to feel unseen." I realized then that he was not asking for my heart. He was offering me his. When he asked me to be his wife, there was no pressure in his voice. He did not kneel as a man begging to be chosen. He stood before me as an equal, prepared to accept whatever answer I gave. I said yes, not because my heart raced, but because it felt steady, because for the first time, love did not feel like something I had to earn. News of our engagement traveled quickly through London. Whispers followed me once again, though they sounded different this time. Some were surprised. Some were pitying. Others were envious. And then there was him, the Marquess of Whitmore. When he learned of my engagement, I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before: confusion, followed by something far more unsettling, regret. For the first time, the man who had once dismissed my love looked at me as though he had lost something irreplaceable. His composure cracked, just slightly, and I realized the truth. He had never believed I would stop waiting. Yet standing there, engaged to another, I did not feel triumph. I felt clarity. I had not chosen the Duke to prove anything. I had chosen him because he had never made me feel small, and as my wedding day approached, I understood something at last. The man who arrives quietly can change your life far more deeply than the one who commands your attention. The morning of my wedding arrived without fear. That surprised me. I had always imagined that such a day would come with trembling hands and racing thoughts, but instead, there was calm. A quiet certainty settled over me as though my heart finally knew where it belonged. As I dressed, I studied my reflection, not with doubt, but with recognition. I was no longer the woman who waited to be chosen. I was a woman who had chosen herself. When I arrived at the chapel, sunlight filtered through tall windows, illuminating the aisle in soft gold. The air carried the scent of flowers and something else. Finality. As the guests gathered, I felt it before I saw him. The Marquess of Whitmore. He stood among the others, perfectly dressed, perfectly composed, and yet utterly undone. His face was pale, his posture rigid, as though the effort of standing upright required all his strength. Our eyes met. For a moment, the world narrowed to silence. I and his gaze. I saw everything he had never said, every doubt, every hesitation, every truth he had denied himself. The man who once spoke of duty now looked like a man crushed beneath it, and for the first time, I felt nothing for him, an longing, an anger, an regret. Only distance. As the ceremony began, I walked down the aisle with steady steps. The Duke of Ashford stood waiting for me, his eyes warm, his expression calm. There was no desperation in his gaze, only certainty. When he took my hands, I felt grounded. The vows were spoken softly, sincerely. No dramatic declarations, no promises that rang hollow. Just truth, offered freely, received fully. Yet throughout the ceremony, I could feel the weight of another presence. The Marquis did not look away. When the minister declared us husband and wife, something broke. Not within me, within him. His composure finally failed, just for an instant, enough for me to see it. His jaw tightened, his breath faltered, and I understood then what he had come too late to realize. He had not lost me because he did not love me. He had lost me because he believed I would always remain. As we exited the chapel, cheers filled the air. The Duke's hand remained firm around mine, steady and sure. I did not look back, I did not need to. Later that evening, at the reception, the Marquis approached me. "I was wrong," he said quietly, his voice strained. I did not know. I did not understand. I met his gaze calmly. "I know," I replied. That was all. There was nothing left to explain. No apology could change what had already passed. Love, once dismissed, does not return simply because regret arrives. He watched as I turned away, my hand resting in my husband's. And in that moment, I knew he finally understood the meaning of endurance. Not the endurance of waiting, but the endurance of loss. For years, he had believed control was strength. That day, he learned otherwise, and I walked forward unburdened. Marriage did not change my life in a single, dramatic moment. There was no sudden transformation, no overwhelming rush of emotion that declared everything perfect. Instead, love arrived the way dawn does, quietly, gently, without asking permission. The Duke of Ashford, my husband, never tried to impress me after our vows were spoken. There was no sense of victory in him, no need to claim what was already freely given. He simply continued being the man he had always been, steady, present, kind. Our mornings began in silence more often than conversation. He would read while I watched the light move across the room, and in that stillness, I felt something I had never known before: safety. With him, I did not have to perform. I did not have to earn affection through patience or endurance. Love was not something withheld, it was something shared. He noticed small things, the way I preferred my tea, the moments when my thoughts drifted inward, the memories that still occasionally haunted me. He never demanded explanations, never asked me to justify my past pain. He simply stayed. One evening, as we sat together beneath a quiet sky, I asked him something that had long lived in my heart. "Why me?" I asked. "You could have chosen anyone." He did not answer immediately. "Because you know what it means to wait," he said at last. "And you chose not to let that waiting harden you." In that moment, I realized something profound. Love is not proven through intensity. It is proven through consistency. The Marquess of Whitmore faded from my life as time passed. Occasionally, I heard whispers of him, of his continued success, his impeccable reputation. But his name no longer stirred anything within me. Regret belongs to those who arrive too late. I had moved on. Years passed gently. Life unfolded in ordinary ways: shared meals, quiet walks, laughter that came without effort. There were disagreements, misunderstandings, moments of distance, but never doubt. The Duke never made me question my place beside him. And in return, I learned to open my heart fully, not out of fear of loss, but out of trust. One afternoon, as I watched him walk toward me across the garden, I realized how far I had come. I was no longer the woman who begged silently to be seen. I was the woman who had been chosen, not because she waited, but because she stood. If I could speak to the girl I once was, the one who believed love was something earned through suffering, I would tell her this: love does not wound to prove its depth. Love does not test your worth. Love does not ask you to disappear. Love stays, and in staying, it heals everything that came before.